Welcome to How to AP Lang. Today we're going to be talking about Unit 2 of the AP Lang curriculum, Understanding Rhetoric, Claims, and Evidence. Today we're going to be going through a series of slideshows discussing rhetoric, claims, evidence, and then doing 4, I believe, multiple choice AP level questions to help you understand the ideas better. So this is very similar to what the College Board videos are like, but hopefully a little bit easier to understand and digest, as I just recently went through AP Lang as a student, so I think this should be helpful. So what is rhetoric? So I'm going to go through rhetoric rather quickly because that was the entire idea of Unit 1. So if you want more on rhetoric, check out my Unit 1 video. However, we're really going to be focusing on claims and evidence today. But very simply, rhetoric is the art of using effective or persuasive speaking or writing, especially the use of figures of speech and other compositional techniques. And this is very simply the language being used to persuade others or the power of words. Rhetoric is rather simple. In the other video, we went through pathos, logos, and ethos as well, but that's all of the Unit 1 stuff. For AP Lang, the units aren't broken up in such an easy way to understand. So a lot of them do blend together. Obviously, there's only so many ways you can break up a writing. So it's a lot of blend. That's why I'm not really going to go into rhetoric here. First, we're answering the question, what is a claim? So the claim is the main argument of an essay, the thesis which the essay is centered around, or the question the essay is trying to answer. The claim is like the thesis statement. Everyone knows what a claim is. Claims are, I think, a rather simple idea, and I feel like this unit is a lot more simple than the rhetoric unit, which was the last one. I feel like last unit was a lot more challenging when you have to think of like what influences rhetoric, things like that. I feel like the claim and evidence idea is a lot simpler. Very simply, the entire idea of this unit is what influences a claim of an essay, or pretty much how evidence can be used to benefit the claim. And we're going to see that along the AP questions. But we're going to get to at the end. I just want to answer some of these basic questions right now. But again, if you're in this class, if you're in an AP class, you should probably know what a claim is. So a claim is normally going to be seen in the theses, but a claim, very simply, is something that's spread throughout the essay. It's your argument you're trying to make. But what are the types of thesis you can see? So there's an explicit thesis, which is one that outwardly states the claim with the evidence. And I believe the example we're going to use here, oh, no, that's later in the presentation, never mind. So pretty much the idea can be seen through evidence A and B. So for example, it could be like for history essays, for example, you could be like, the Ottomans expanded greatly in the period due to, as seen through their land and sea expansions or something, specific evidence. Or you can see implied theses, which are ones that are implied within the claim but not outwardly stated. So an idea is seen throughout time, for example. So an implied thesis is one you're going to see a lot more in the AP, because implied theses are pretty much you having to read the text and then filling out what the thesis is. An explicit thesis will tell you everything you need to know in it. It's a lot, in my opinion, a lot more basic. But an implied thesis is also an explicit thesis is a lot more basic. It's a lot easier to understand. And you're rarely going to see it on the AP because you don't have to do much. It's written right out. Implied theses, especially what we're going to see in the multiple choice, which we'll get to, are like ones that are the claim, and it does state the claim throughout the essay. However, it might not say it outright. It might not say the claim of my essay is this. It's going to be blended throughout your introduction. It's not going to just show it to you with flashing lights like explicit. Implied is a lot more hidden, and the AP is going to show that a lot more. So I really do suggest understanding what an implied versus explicit thesis is and how to recognize an implied thesis. However, it really isn't terrible. All you need to do is just understand what the main idea is. If you can read something and understand, oh, this is the main idea, that's what the implied thesis is. So what is evidence? Evidence are the ideas that help back up the claim, facts that can help further explain the claim and enrich the essay and the argument. So evidence is, in my opinion, also very simple. I mean, like it's just understanding what backs up an essay. I feel like anyone who's written an essay knows, like, oh, I'm using this piece of evidence to back up my claim. I'm using this piece of evidence to back up my claim. Evidence is just what, like, you're not going to just be like, I believe that pizza is better than pasta. Your evidence is why you believe that. And we're going to talk about types of evidence now, so that's a good segue. So types of evidence. So there's 3 types. There's the ones that provide examples. So those are like the most profitable. And I'd say when I say provide examples, I mean ones that are most likely data-based. So for example, the idea we're going to use today is what makes this random pizza restaurant in this random town the best. That's the argument. That's the claim. So this idea, the first type of evidence, the one that provides example, it's the most profitable pizza restaurant in the town. So that's using data. It's not saying in theory, it could say the by a margin of like a few hundred or a few $1,000s. However, I just said the most profitable, and that's still using data. It's still saying this is how much. It's not saying exactly how much, but it's saying the most profitable. It's using a numeric data. It's not stating the numeric outright, but like it's saying a good statement. The next is to amplify a point. Many rate it the most tasty pizza in town. Again, that's amplifying the point. It has very good pizza, and it's using ideas. Many rate it. It's not just saying it. Some people think it is the most tasty pizza in town. It's saying many rate it like that. It has some sort of evidence behind it. And the last type is to set a mood. Many feel pride in helping a small restaurant instead of a chain restaurant. So those are just some reasons why this restaurant could be the best in town. And these are the three types of evidence. Even though you should know the three types of evidence, you should be able to look at a piece of evidence and say, this is a based piece of evidence. This is one used to amplify a point. This is one to set a mood. And each evidence should be distinct enough that you can see it. As long as you can recognize the fact that it is evidence, then you should be okay. I'd say the level to which the evidence is benefiting the claim is more important than understanding what type of evidence it is, because evidence is, I'd say, rather subjective in a sense that the first one, where it says provide example, could also be to amplify the point. The most profitable pizza restaurant in town could, in theory, also be to amplify the point that it's a great pizza restaurant. So I'd say it's a good thing, very similar to the thesis. You should know the difference between the explicit and implied thesis. I'd say that's more important than here, where you should just be able to point out the differences between types of evidence, but even more so than just understand what a piece of evidence is, and not just something like what a good piece of evidence is. I'd say that, or what an important piece of evidence is, especially when it comes to your essays. But we're going to talk about that in a second. Firstly, though, I want to just look at this image. So this is a very famous thing that the College Board loves to use. I think in every single one of like the tip videos the College Board has, this image shows up. Very simply, all it's showing is like a body paragraph will have one or two pieces of evidence and reasoning to support the main idea, conclusion, or thesis. This is saying it's a 4-paragraph essay, and half the paragraph should have two pieces of evidence. Of course, that's for some of the essays. I think some of the essays aren't going to need 4 paragraphs. Some of them are only going to have 2 body paragraphs. And if they're having like 2 or 3 body paragraphs, just have the majority of the paragraphs have at least 2 good pieces of evidence. And what I mean by pieces of evidence, what the image means, is it's not just saying the entire paragraph is based off of one piece of evidence. That's not what it's saying. It's saying, well, it is based off one piece of evidence. However, it's having like one big idea of evidence or 2 big ideas of evidence with other sub pieces of evidence to back it up. So it's not just 2 pieces of evidence, that's all you need. You should have 2 pieces of evidence with a few other pieces of evidence to back it up. And even if that might sound daunting, when you're actually writing an essay, it's not actually that much work because you do it naturally. So what are some skills to know for claims and evidence? I'm going to be doing this type of slide more often because I feel like it's actually really helpful. But where can it be used? So it will help with all the essays. In my opinion, that's rather obvious. Like the rhetoric and the rhetorical situation can help with anything. It's mostly going to help with the second essay, though, which is the rhetorical situation essay. Here, I feel like it's a very good claims and evidence, can really help with anything. But here's some multiple choice things you are going to see mostly for claims and evidence. Questions that ask what the claim of the piece is. Questions that are asking if the evidence supports the claim. Or things that are substituting other ideas into underlying phrases, which I'll get to in a second. Adding sentences which better support the claim, or removing sentences that convolute the claim. So these are just, in my opinion, the most common types of questions for claims and evidence you're going to see. And in a second, we're actually going to do an AP level question, 4 AP level questions, which I believe one question for each of these bullet points. So here's the AP level question for this unit. This is one of the ones from the progress check. In the progress check, this is actually 8 questions. I only picked 4 of them because I didn't want to do 8 in the video. So I'm going to give you a second to read this. You're also going to be able to pause the video to do so. So just read through it, and then we're going to do the 4 questions together. Okay, so I doubt you could have read that in that time. However, I didn't want to just sit here for like 2 minutes while you read it. So pause the video if you need more time, but we're going to go into the questions. So the first question, which of the following sentences express the main claim of the passage? So this is a very common one you're going to see on the AP, and this is a very simple one. Again, I picked 4 questions out of the 8. These are 4 very good questions in my opinion. So let's look at it. Question 5, not the question, sentence 5. In this way, wildlife officials caught 114 goats in the first phase of the mountain goat management plan, but they ultimately will have relocated 90% of the 700 goats from the Olympics to the North Cascades. Is that really the claim? No. 6, this removal process may be complicated, but it is necessary. 6 is the claim. I know that right now. What are the other sentences? 9 and 10. Since then, the goat population has flourished. That's not really a claim. Plus, it's in the second paragraph. You can pretty much already rule out 9 and 10. You should still read it, but the answer is 6. It's at the end of the first paragraph, which is another way to know. The majority of the time, the claim is going to be the last or the second to last sentence of the opening paragraph. Or if the opening paragraph is in two, if it's like a 2 paragraph introduction. However, you can also, once you read the piece, you can pretty much figure that out. So the answer to this one's going to be 6. This one, in my opinion, is rather easy, which is why I went through it rather quickly. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to question 2 of 4. So this one, the writer wants sentence 11 to serve as evidence that reinforces the argument of the passage. So we just learned is that the argument of the passage, or the claim, assuming you got the last question right, was that they need the goats to leave. So a brief attempt to relocate the goats was met with public outcry. It's not really supporting the claim that they need to be moved, because this is a protest to it. And if people are protesting it, then do they really need to be moved? So let's read it. Which of the following versions of the underlined portions of sentence 11 best accomplishes this goal? So A is as it is now. You're going to see some of those in this type of question. In my opinion, it's probably not going to be that, because that's more of a counter argument and it's not really reinforcing the arguments of the passage. But we'll keep it on the table. B had no impact on the amount of erosion in the region. This one's a better answer than A, so I'm going to get rid of A. However, this one's still not a great answer, because if you wanted to serve as argument that they need to be moved and them being moved will benefit people and the goats, then why would it be? Then this is more had no impact. If it had no impact, what's the difference than keeping them there? So let's actually rule out B as well. I don't think that's a great answer. C proved difficult as the goats retreated to areas where that were challenging for humans to access. So this is not a terrible answer, and I feel like this question is kind of challenging. However, that's also not a great answer, because that's also not saying why the goats needed to be moved. The goats retreated on their own accord is not very helpful. And plus, getting away from human access, that's not fully accurate. So D resulted in noticeable improvements in the park's environment. As we read in the passage, it does help. The goats were harming the environment. So noticeable improvements, I think the word improvements alone should cue you that the answer is answer D. Next, question 3. The writer wants to add a sentence after sentence 12 to provide needed background information for readers who may not be familiar with mountain goats. Which of the following choices best accomplishes this goal? So let's read sentence 12 quickly. This is start paragraph 3. However, safety concerns were the most pressing reason for the goats' removal. So, what were the safety concerns? So, let's read 13. Let's just see what it might come. With few salt licks in the Olympics, the goats turn to another source, humans. So we know that, and then it later goes on to say that salt in human sweat is a goat magnet. So safety concerns, and then it immediately goes into salt. So the sentence that could be added is most likely going to relate to the lack of salt, or the fact that goats need salt. So let's look at the question now. Sorry if you just saw that. The writer wants to add a sentence, blah, blah, blah. Which of the following best accomplishes the goal? Adult male mountain goats can reach weights of as much as 180 pounds. Is that really a safety concern? Not really. Plus, does it relate to the rest of the paragraph with the salt? No. So I'm going to rule that one out. B, mountain goats eat a wide variety of plants, including grasses, lichens, and even twigs. Again, not really benefiting the salt, not really showing a safety concern. C, people are advised to stay at least 50 yards away from mountain goats. C is not a terrible answer, because C is saying it does say that human sweat is salt magnets, is a magnet for goats because of the salt. It says that in a paragraph. That's not a terrible answer. Or D, mountain goats find salt irresistible. So, in my opinion, the correct answer is going to be D. And if you just saw that, yeah. The reason why D is a better answer than C is because D, when it says the mountain goats find the salt irresistible, that's what cues it to saying the human salt is so bad. People being advised to stay so far away and then going into the salt is not providing the background needed. It's giving a safety concern, sure. However, that answer C should be after, in like sentence 15 or 16, after one of those, instead of after sentence 12, which is about the salt. So that's why D is going to be the correct answer. But again, the claim here is that they were a safety concern, and in the evidence in the paragraphs about the salt. So you need to connect it to that. The reason why paragraphs are paragraphs is because they're breaking up ideas, they're breaking up evidence. So if that paragraph is going to be about the salt, you need your evidence to be about the salt, and to be in um, temporal order, or like order that like makes sense. Okay, next and final question. Again, if you want more questions on this passage alone or on this, there's 18 questions in the progress check on AP Classroom, but these are just 4 questions I took from this one because I think it's good. Here we go. The writer is considering deleting the underlying text in sentence 14. Salt in human sweat is a goat magnet, which we just read. Worse still, some thoughtless and irresponsible, that's the underlying sentence, people feed the goats directly. Should the writer keep or delete the underlying text? So this is an interesting one. This is an adjective. These are 2 adjectives: thoughtless and irresponsible. You could just say some people feed the goats directly, but that's not really. Some salted in human sweat is a goat magnet. Worse still, some people feed the goats directly. So if the goats are going closer to the salt because of the sweat, and worse, some people feed the goats directly, that's bring them closer. But thoughtless and irresponsible is placing some of the blame on humans, even though the goats are the safety concern. The human, if the goats, even if the goats are not a safety concern, the humans should not be blamed for the action. Unless, but like, it's hard. It's a hard thing to say. Let's read the. This is a challenging question. Let's read the answers. So A, and there's, I'll say on the AP, you're going to see a few questions like this where it's to keep it or to delete it. In my opinion, these are actually fun questions, but that's just subjective. A, keep it because it makes the argument more persuasive by including language that increases the emotional engagement of the audience. A is not terrible. However, I don't think A is a great answer. In my opinion, it's a fine answer. I don't think it's great because even though it's persuasive, it's not persuading it in the argument that the goats need to be removed. In theory, that would be the people need to be removed. So A is not a great answer. I'm actually going to get rid of that one. B, keep it because it encourages the audience to identify with the park officials who work to solve the problem rather than park visitors who make the problem worse. So this one's not great. I feel like this one could be decent, but again, I feel like the entire idea of the passage, the claim, and here's what's very helpful with this. With these types of questions, you should always know whether it's keep it or delete it before you even read the answers, because at the end of the day, it's telling you they keep it or delete it. It should be benefiting the claim, and here it's kind of turning the claim onto humans. Humans, in theory, this should be humans should stay away from goats because it said in the passage one of the greatest issues is the safety concern they cause, especially for humans. So blaming on the humans makes it not a great, it kind of defeats the claim. So in my opinion, going into it, you should know it's going to be deleted. However, this one's definitely a little bit more in the middle. So I'd say this one's a little bit more challenging. However, there's 2 of these types of questions for this passage. The other one's a little bit easier, but I wanted to keep the more challenging one. Let's continue onward. C, delete it because it distracts from the writer's purpose of emphasizing human safety concerns by using language that focuses blame on human visitors in the park. So this is a very good answer. This is one I've been alluding to. D, because it contradicts the writer's claim in sentence 15 that goats behave differently after they are accustomed to human contact. So D is also not a great answer. I say D is not a terrible answer, but it shouldn't be affecting the things after it. The correct answer is going to be C here. This is, in my opinion, the most challenging question that was out of the 8 for this document. If you want to go onto AP Classroom and learn more, you can, but these are 4 questions I thought were good to do together in preparation. So that is my lesson on Unit 2 of AP Language and Composition. This is on understanding rhetoric, claims, and evidence. We mostly focus on claims and evidence. However, we can do another video on rhetoric or more videos on claims and evidence in the future. I am also planning on doing another video on the how to write an essay on the AP level. So we definitely have a few videos coming up of definitely a few interesting ideas. So stay tuned, but I hope this was definitely very helpful. Understanding Unit 2 of AP Lang. See you guys in the next one.